he knows. I have had direct, strong experiences with him, which show me that he's not a human being, that he's something supra-human.
The story of Sri Satya Sai Baba and his impact on people's lives around the world. Welcome to Sai Souljourns. This is part 2 of the story of philosophy professor Dr. Alber Ferrer of Barcelona, Spain, recorded at Sai Baba's ashram in Puttaparthi, India, in December of 2008.
I had the intuition already some weeks back, before knowing about this, that Mr. Obama, whose victory is a gift for all of us, that in some way he will be connected to the Purna Avatar. I had this intuition. In fact, when he had his victory, which is for all of us, it's a tremendous change for the USA and for the world. Then when this extraordinary news came out, I had the intuition very deep that this good man who will be the President of the United States of America will come to Sai Baba, to the Purna Avatar. And this for me was the materialization of a dream which I had long time back. If you don't mind, I can explain this dream because it was extraordinary.
Yes.
In the first interview, I spoke about the illness which came something like 5-6 years back. And at that time, when I started healing myself, I told you I had many dreams from Swami, many. In something like 1.5 years, maybe I had 50-60 dreams. Some of them were very personal, all very beautiful, very powerful, very vivid in color. It's this kind of dream which is not a dream, which is another plane of reality, another sphere of the real world. And in these dreams, what you are dreaming is more real than the empirical world. And Swami's dreams have this quality. So among all these beautiful, extraordinary dreams, which were guiding me and helping me, I'm sure even at a vibration level in this process of self-healing, among all these beautiful dreams, there was one which is to be shared with all human beings. Imagine New York with all the skyscrapers at the end, on the skyline. And imagine Broad Avenue crossing
Broadway?
the center of New York. I don't know which street, but it was a Broad Avenue going towards United Nations in New York. On both sides of the avenue, which was closed to the traffic, on both sides there was a mass of people. It was in that dream, this mass of people on both sides of the avenue was the whole mankind. There was total silence. And there were loudspeakers on the avenue which were sending the main mantra of India, of Indian mysticism, Om, the sound of the creation according to Indian philosophy, Om. Can you imagine full silence in New York? And the sound of the creation, Om, resounding in New York. Then, through this empty avenue, some great beings were walking side by side. I recognized Jesus and other great masters of mankind, self-realized beings, masters of mankind. They were walking slowly, beautiful, shining. They came through this avenue until the building of United Nations. And in front of them, very important detail, in front of them, to some distance, another one was walking, Sai Baba. Sai Baba was walking first, and after him, the great masters of mankind, among them Jesus, were walking in this silence with the Om resounding in New York.
What a beautiful
They
dream.
came in until the building of United Nations, and they stepped in. They came into the main hall for the assembly, And the following picture was also unbelievably beautiful and powerful. Sai Baba, with the masters of mankind on both sides of him, were standing up, and in front of them all the leaders of mankind in the whole of United Nations Assembly, bending, surrendering to Sai Baba and the masters of mankind. All the most powerful leaders of mankind were kneeling and surrendering to the will of the masters, the will of the Purna Avatar. And the dream was finished. So the meaning was very clear. The political power of the planet Earth will surrender to the will of God, to the light. Excuse me, I think that the victory of a good man like Mr. Obama is the beginning of the materialization of this dream. Excuse me, and because now I remember something very important. Sai Baba has said in public discourses several times, and he said still very recently, that all these corrupted and stupid politicians in India will go out. He said very strongly that all these corrupted and stupid politicians will go out. And India will be ruled by good human beings, many of them former students of his institutes.
Wonderful.
And he said, not only this will happen in India, this will happen in the whole world. There will be a new generation of very young politicians who will be honest, pure, and good, and who will be able and who will be willing to serve mankind and to bring the light in the planet Earth.
And this is what Swami has told somebody. This is not a part of the dream, is it?
No, these are public discourses.
Yeah.
He has said in public discourses.
And about your dream, do you find often or occasionally your dreams are prophetic, that they are a circumstance that you learn of early that do become reality?
Well, for my life they have been. Mm-hmm. For instance, when I was still ill, and I was recovering, I was doing all my process of self-healing. At this point, when I had so many dreams, I was in these dreams, I was seeing myself getting cured. I could see myself getting cured, walking more and more. And after some weeks, after 2 months, I could walk all these distances that were shown in the dreams before. So this was a regular thing in those dreams. When I was walking in the recovery process, when I was walking just a little bit, I was dreaming that I was walking much more. After 2 weeks, I was walking much more. And all this was happening regularly as a regular pattern. Not only this, in some dreams, Swami told me, you will come back to India. Here I am in India now.
Yes.
When I was not able to walk. And he told me, you will work in my university. I am a visiting professor in his university. In one dream, he told me, you will take care of 3 boys in India. I have adopted 3 Indian
all these
brothers.
Come true.
Everything has happened.
He has spoken of the golden age, maybe even in your dreams. Does he ever give you an indication, or do you know of a time frame as to what the beginning of the golden age might be?
In my dreams, I have never had anything like a schedule or a calendar. He never say any kind of dates in my dreams. There are other sources which are speaking about some kind of dates. There are many sources which are pointing at 2012 as a crucial year, 2015 after. What we had as a clear information here in Puttaparthi, in Sai Baba's ashram, was, he said that in July, for the World Conference on Education, he said that after 28, 30 years, there will be total, full peace in the world. The world will be totally united. There will be unity in the planet Earth. Which means, and he said like this, that the Dharma, what in India we call the Dharma, which is the will of God, all the human values, will be established on the Earth. The Earth will live in peace and unity. totally, fully in 30 years. So if this must be a reality in 30 years, many radical changes must start very, very soon.
Mm-hmm. And they seem to be starting now.
They are starting.
You mentioned 3 times how much good it is, not just for America, but for the world, the election of Obama. Why do you say that? You can't possibly know much about him yet.
I know, as anybody among the common people know, but what I can see and understand through my own discrimination is that it is a radical change for the USA and for the world. The very fact that somebody who is not white can be finally the president of the United States of America is a revolution.
It is unbelievable. I want to ask you something.
It's a big change, already a big change.
I want to ask you something very different. I was listening to you talk to a man yesterday I introduced you to in the front of the Mandir, whose name was John, about philosophy. Do you recall that conversation where you were talking about the ancient philosophers and some of the great thinkers of the world were also very knowledgeable of the Vedas?
Well, we're talking a little bit about quantum physics as something totally different from the kind of mechanicistic science which started in the 19th century. And he mentioned something which has been very important in my work, that the fathers of quantum physics, most of them were interested in Indian philosophy, in particular in Vedic philosophy, Vedas, Vedanta, Upanishads. And some of them, many of them read something about Indian philosophy, Vedas, and some of them even came to India. And this has been something which has developed very much. Many of the scientists in the West working in this field of quantum science, whatever area, quantum physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, all the fields of quantum science, many of the scientists working in this quantum approach fully realize that the main principles and conclusions of quantum science are profoundly, deeply identical to the principles of Vedic philosophy and Vedanta. And some of them have plainly said that now, at the beginning of the 21st century or through the 20th century, quantum science is reaching the same conclusions that many philosophers of India reached 3,000 years back. And this convergence between quantum science in the 21st century and the ancient Vedic philosophy was already predicted by great spiritual masters like Vivekananda.
There are 5 of us here sitting in this tiny, tiny, tiny room in Puttaparthi right now. And you feel Sai Baba in your heart because of the many stories you've already shared with me in part 1 of the interview. What do you think one day soon Sai Baba will expect from us who are aware of him and who come here to learn about his mission for us? What do you think he's going to expect us to do someday soon, if anything?
Well, everybody has his or her own path, and this is unique for everybody. So in more concrete terms, we couldn't say anything except but for ourselves. In general, I think that not only Sai Baba, but any true spiritual master, any true teacher would expect from anybody to do as much as possible our own process of transformation. I think this is our first duty and the most important thing we can do for the world and for others. Before helping others, before wanting to do any social service or any work in this world, we should think of our own transformation. Only by really changing ourselves, we can really bring something positive to others and to the world. And I would say that Sai Baba and any spiritual master would expect this from us, to do as best as possible, as much as we can, honestly, this own work with ourselves before working for the others.
So this sort of seems to preclude much seva on our part, unless you think of spiritual transformation as a form of seva all by itself, and that as Albert becomes more spiritually purified, it radiates off to those around Albert.
Of course. And this will be the revolution for the 21st century, after the failure of all the revolutions of the modern age, which we shouldn't judge, but we should be totally aware that all the freedom movements of modern history have not succeeded.
Freedom
movements have totally failed, because all of them wanted to change the world, but nobody was changing himself or herself.
So that's key. That has to be done first.
The modern age, sometimes some people have asked to great political thinkers, what is the main characteristic of the modern age when we compare it to the medieval period or the ancient times? And all political thinkers say there are two things in the modern age which are unique. One, the key role of the mass. The mass becomes something fundamental in the 20th century. In the 19th already, but especially in the 20th century, the mass of the people, the revolution. It's the age of the revolutions, starting with the French Revolution. The revolution is the mass of the people going out in the streets, even cutting the head of the king. That's really unique in the 20th century. And this mass phenomenon of the modern age, it is for what? Precisely for the revolution, for changing things. So the freedom movement is something really fundamental in the modern age. But what is this revolution of the modern age? It is always the same pattern, changing the world. We will change the world, but we have not changed ourselves. So the revolutionary do exactly the same than the previous oppressive regime. And this has been the history of the modern age. French Revolution, all the communist, socialist, nationalistic, anarchist revolutions through the 19th century until the 20th, the Russian, the Chinese, all the social revolutions always have brought what? Exactly the continuation of the same old patterns of consciousness, all the same evils from the past.
You don't believe man is capable of learning from history, that the current pope, that the chief rabbi of Israel, that the imams are able to see this awful pattern and not learn from it and teach their followers to transform themselves first, as Swami says?
I think that this will be a great thing in the coming years, that this awareness will come out massively.
And do you think Swami's role in this is alone, that he's the one who's emphasizing this the most, or that others from others, spirituality, and even field of science, quantum thinkers, might be able to come to this conclusion as well?
Well, Swami has always said that he's not alone, that there are other great beings in the world, and apart from great beings, there are many human beings, more and more human beings, who are awakening, and who are awakening, of course, inwardly, but who are also awakening to the awareness that the only true change is a change within oneself. And this brings a change in the world. More and more people are becoming aware of that. And there is undoubtedly a shift in human consciousness in our time. And this will bring a change in the vibration of the whole of mankind. It is already happening.
How do you know this is not just a shift in your own consciousness, that it's also a shift in the consciousness of more people?
Well, it is the profound teachings of interdependence, which are present in the Vedas, in Vedanta, in Buddhism, and also in the teachings of Jesus, in the Christian teachings, also in the Kabbalah, also in the Romantic philosophy, and in the Neoplatonic philosophy of Renaissance, and of course in the Greek philosophers. In all the profound mystical philosophy, we have always had this fundamental point of interdependence. Everything is connected with everything. There is a profound unity behind or at the very basis of the diversity which we can see. And this interdependence, this profound unity, is now also being understood by quantum science again.
We are just about at the beginning of the year 2009, just a couple of weeks away, and America and much of the world suffering a tremendous financial crisis. But I think I heard you say the other day that it's much more than a financial crisis, that it's a crisis of consciousness. Do you remember saying that?
Well, this started as a financial crisis and it is becoming an economic crisis. Technically, it's not the same. Financial crisis is not an economic crisis. Now it's already an economic crisis. And I think after more than 20 years at the university and studying social studies and philosophy, I think I understand that this financial economic crisis is the crisis and final crisis of a whole model of civilization, which was unsustainable and mad and crazy. And this was the only true intuition of Karl Marx, who was a prisoner. On the other side, he was a prisoner of this Maya, as we say in India, illusion of the social revolution. He put the philosophical basis, foundations for the socialist or communist revolution. And what did it bring in real terms? All the horrors of the Soviet Union, of the Red Khmers in Cambodia. But himself, what was he doing? You take all his speech about freedom and he's full of prejudice, of which he's ignorant. He's repeating, talking about freedom. While talking about freedom, he's repeating all the patterns of the capitalism he's criticizing. His state of consciousness is the same than the one of the businessmen he's criticizing. And this you find everywhere. You take all the revolutions, all the social revolutions, and today, which is the big freedom movement in our world? Feminism. Take many feminists. Their state of consciousness is the one of the machism they are criticizing. It's always the same. In fact, you become a prisoner of what you are criticizing. Oops. You become a prisoner of what you are criticizing. And Karl Marx was a prisoner of the capitalism he was criticizing. He repeated the same patterns of thought of capitalism while he was opposing it. And the model of civilization, the concept of man he had in mind, was a capitalistic one. He didn't create a new paradigm, a new model of civilization, a new concept of man. It was the same old one and the same from capitalism.
Doomed to failure because of that.
Do you know who had a real different pattern of civilization and a really different concept of man at that time? Or just before him? The Romantics. Romanticism had a really different concept of the human being and civilization. But these people who were extremely intelligent and sensitive and profound and spiritual were ridiculized by all the liberal and also Marxist dominant thought. And they were totally put aside. Romanticism has an extraordinary treasure for mankind and for the West in particular today. They realized all these truths, all this quantum science.
Centuries ago. What about Swami, back to what his main mission to me seems to be, and that is to evoke personal individual transformation of spirit. And I ask this often of people because I'm never satisfied with anybody's answer as to why he seemingly touches so few people in such an overcrowded world. Such an important message, and yet handfuls of people know about this, from Barcelona to Cleveland, Ohio. What is the explanation you can come up with as to why it doesn't spread like wildfire?
Well, first I would say his message has spread amazingly fast, and I would say even on a quite mass scale. Today, how many human beings would be closely following his teachings by considering themselves as like pupils or devotees? I think some sociologists have tried to put forward some figure, but we should speak of dozens and dozens of millions in India, in the whole world. Millions and millions. How many millions? 50 millions? 80 millions?
But my guess is the average Spaniard's never heard of Sai Baba.
Well, there are thousands and thousands of people in Spain, only in one big city, who have heard of him. Much more than you know. Much more than we think very often. In fact, there are much more people who know Sai Baba in the world, in the West, than we think very often.
Is it because of word of mouth, do you think, or is it because of the personal experiences he gives individuals?
Well, it's spreading through many channels, but mainly through the direct experience of many people and the direct conversation. But there are more people in the world who know about him than we many times think. But not only this, if you take serious figures, sociological figures about how many people are following him as devotees or pupils, I'm sure of course it's a fact of millions, and probably more than 40, 50 millions, going towards 100 millions. How many people were following Jesus in his lifetime? How many people were following Buddha in his lifetime? Thousands. Well, Jesus, of course, nothing like this. Very few were following Jesus. Very few. Buddha, more. How many? Several thousands. With Sai Baba, we are talking of millions. There is a huge gap. And one interesting point, you can say, well, but now we are in the 20th, 21st century, so now there is television and all these things. Well, please note down something. Sai Baba has never used television. He has never done tours as other spiritual leaders have done. So Sai Baba is followed, closely followed by millions and millions of human beings, and very well known by many more millions, without using the mass media of our time, using instruments which are much more close to the ones that Buddha or Jesus were using, we could say, basically very traditional tools. He's known by millions and millions. He's not using television for getting known. He's not using the radio. Of course, there is a radio Sai, and there are some virtual spaces about Swami in internet, but all this is very recent. For many years, there was nothing like this. This has only been created in the last years. And he has never used television. He has never done tours around the world. So he has used a very traditional approach until very recently, which was a direct personal relationship. And through this direct physical relationship, and through dreams, and through introducing himself to other human beings, around the world, in different ways, through the ways which had been always used by spiritual masters in China, in India, in the Christian world, hundreds of years back, through these traditional ways, he has get known by millions. This is unique in all the history of mankind.
I think I heard you mention Tigret's tape story. Did you mention that a couple of minutes ago?
No, I didn't.
Okay, then I misunderstood.
I don't know very well his story. I know a little bit about it, but there have been thousands of.
What I was going to say was
like
Swami's message often changes hands and is extended outward to the world through the personal stories of other individuals. And every time Jody and I come here, we collect, it seems, dozens of news stories. We're reading about this Iranian woman who worked in my profession, television news. Swami approached. We hear about your story, how Swami approached you.
Well, you see, now we can go out from this room, we can walk through the main road of Puttaparthi. We will hear one language almost inevitably. Just by walking some minutes on the main road of Puttaparthi, we'll hear almost inevitably one language, or Russian.
Yes.
There are thousands of people coming from Russia to India, to many ashrams of India, and of course to Sai Baba's ashram. How is it possible that an Indian guru manifests himself so massively through the whole Russia, from Moscow to Vladivostok, through the whole Siberia and European Russia? Sai Baba is manifesting himself without traveling to Russia, without going into Russian television for interviews, without using the typically modern tools or instruments. He's manifesting himself through the whole Russia.
And you are aware that he says the world will come to understand his mission when the Muslims come.
Yeah.
And do you see any sign that that's about to happen?
Well, it started. There are people from all the religions in the world here. Even Buddhists come to see Sai Baba, which is quite amazing if you think about it, because Buddhism has reproduced all the kinds of misunderstandings which are typical in all religions, in the history of all religions. Buddha gave some teachings. It's very difficult to know what Buddha taught. Extremely difficult. Which Buddhists usually don't recognize. Not only because he never wrote anything. He only gave oral teachings. But we shouldn't forget one point. Buddha taught around 500 BC. We don't know exactly when he lived. And the first Buddhist sacred books are written down around the time of Jesus. So 400, 500 years passed. If you take Jesus' teachings, there's not such a huge gap. The pupils started writing Jesus' teachings much before that. Only some years of
50
gap.
to 100 years only, yeah.
Only some years of gap for Jesus. For Buddha, centuries. So what did Buddha teach? It's quite difficult to know it with such a huge gap. But Buddhism has given a series of teachings. Through this history, all the typical misunderstandings that happen in all the religions have also happened. And you know that there is a very strong prejudice in the orthodox Buddhist teachings about God and the soul. Denying the very existence of God is a total prejudice in Orthodox Buddhism.
Is it true that it's mostly a philosophy, a philosophical view of life rather than an attachment to a deity?
Well, I would say it depends on what Buddhism you are talking about. Because the Buddhist teachings are so huge and the Buddhist scriptures are so vast that it depends on what you take. If you read some Buddhist scriptures, you can reach some conclusions. If you read other Buddhist scriptures, you can reach totally different conclusions. There is a huge diversity of teachings in Buddhism, which is not acknowledged by the dogmatism of many scholars. But excuse me 1 minute. But in any case, there is a dogmatic point in many Buddhist teachings denying the existence of God, where they don't want to recognize anything like the idea of God. And being things like this, even in Tibetan Buddhism, this point is very strong. It's not like that in Chinese Buddhism, especially Mahayana. In Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, the situation there changes quite a lot. Even though this is like this, we can see Buddhist Tibetan monks coming to Puttaparthi. And other Buddhists are coming to Puttaparthi, recognizing Swami as, in their language, a great bodhisattva. And some of them almost speaking the language of divinity.
That's
even Buddhists who come from this prejudice, denial of God, are coming to Puttaparthi and recognizing Swami as, in their language, a great bodhisattva. And Muslims who have in their orthodox teachings a prejudice against the incarnation of God. Of course, Islam has no prejudice about God. Not at all. God is the fundament of everything for Islam. But there is a prejudice in Orthodox Islam about the incarnation of God. There are many Muslims in Puttaparthi.
Yeah.
Apart from the local Muslims, of course. Muslims coming from all Muslim countries, even from Iran, and of course from Indonesia, from Malaysia. Many Muslims are coming to Puttaparthi. And many Sufis recognize Swami as incarnation of God. And I heard something beautiful from some Muslims here in Puttaparthi, not Indian Muslims, Muslims coming from foreign countries, saying more or less like this, these Muslims, I don't know exactly if Islam is denying or not the incarnation of God. I don't want to know about it. Sai Baba is God on the earth. That's the only thing which I want to know about.
It's unbelievable.
This is happening with Islam today in Puttaparthi. Swami has said that the whole Muslim world will recognize him.
Albert, I could listen to you.
Swami said that.
He has said that the whole world will recognize him, and also the Islam world.
I wish I were younger again so I could be a student in your classroom in Barcelona. There is a university in America, perhaps elsewhere they do this too, where when a tenured professor is about to retire, they give him the microphone in front of a large audience, and he talks about, this is what I believe. Then he draws from his life's experiences and his faith and his academic background. If you had such an opportunity, and of course you have no time to prepare for it, because I'm just asking you right now, what would you tell the people sitting in the Mandir on Christmas Day if you were so fortunate to be invited to give a speech as Father Charles Ogata was a couple of years ago to the assembled masses, or here in front of a television camera, or from the podium at Barcelona at the major university there? How would you begin to relate what's important to you? And take the opportunity now to just explore some ideas, because I think it's valuable.
Well, I think that small is best. Thinking small without being willing to great things is the best approach to do finally great things. So I wouldn't say what many people would say, I want to change the world, I want that the world becomes beautiful, extraordinary. Thinking so big would not be my starting point. My starting point would be very small. What I would first of all take care would be my own sons. I have 3 beautiful sons. Being a father would be, being a good father, taking good care of my sons is my first concern now in my life. Then after my sons, which is a sacred duty to take care of your sons, your children. After taking care of my sons as well as I can, my second duty would be being a professor with my students, teaching them well, helping them in depth, being really a good teacher, a good communicator. This would be my second duty today in this world. With all that, and then in my daily life, being a good human being in my daily life, when I do the shopping, when I walk in the street, trying to be just a good human being, as honestly as possible, knowing that I cannot be perfect, and I will do mistakes, and I will do wrong things, but at least honestly trying to do my best. And this brings us to what we were talking about before, which is your own transformation. Trying to do my own transformation as best as possible, as much as I can. This is the best I can do for the world. instead of wanting big things. I don't want to change the world, but I will try to change myself as best as possible.
You're a professor of philosophy. Can individuals truly change if they want to?
This is one of the very few things in which I would believe. And this is one of the most beautiful teachings of Buddhism. This denial of God in some Orthodox Buddhism, I don't like it. I'm not attracted by this kind of Buddhism. But when Buddhism talks about the transformation of the human being, then I am attracted by Buddhist teachings. And this is a very important point in Buddhist teachings, in the beautiful Buddhist teachings, in the beauty of Buddhism. And this has been a very strong point in India too. And I truly believe this would be one of the very few things in which I believe. The capacity of transformation of the human being. Even the worst human being, even the darkest dictator, has the light within. And even the worst human being can transform himself or herself, doesn't matter. Everybody can do it. And so many have done it and are doing it, that how could we deny it? So many have done it, so many are doing it. We can observe it.
Last question. Who is Sai Baba?
I don't know. He knows. He says he is an avatar. Everybody who follows him would say he is an avatar. Of course I believe this. Not through blind intellectual mental belief, but through experience. I have had direct, strong experiences with him, which show me that he's not a human being, that he's something supra-human, above the human level. So this I know by experience, not because I want to believe it, not because anybody has said to me, or because I have read it. I know it from within, through direct experience, that he's not human, that he's above human, so divine. But then I would say, and I think there is a good advice for many people in what I will say now, then I would say, I don't care about the concept of avatar, as we say in India, because only an avatar knows what is an avatar. A human being cannot know what is an avatar. For me, to my human knowledge, it is unthinkable. I cannot understand what is really an avatar, how the avatarhood works, how the avatar really comes down to the earth and works from within. It is beyond my human understanding. I cannot understand. And I prefer to be honest and to say, in my human ignorance, I really cannot know what is an avatar. And I prefer to drop the concept. And this is my advice to many people: be careful with concepts. Concepts are totally needed, but are also dangerous. And much of the intolerance in our world comes from the attachment to concepts. Muslims attach themselves to some concepts. Christians, Orthodox Muslims and Orthodox Christians to other concepts. And Orthodox Hindus, they attach themselves to other concepts. And what do they forget in the struggle for the concept, for the word? They forget the reality. The concept is necessary. The language is necessary. But we should be aware of the limits of concepts and words. And we should prefer the direct experience before the word. After, we'll find some beautiful words to explain the experience, but the experience, the reality, life is much more important than the concepts we can afterwards build to express what we have lived. But let us first live it, then we will find words for it. But we shouldn't give so much importance to concepts. Concepts and words are relative, not absolute. And the experience, life, is much more important.
Alber Ferrer, whether it's Barcelona or Cleveland, Ohio, or Prashanti Milliam in Puttaparthi, India, this should be continued, and I hope it is. Thank you very much, and Sai Ram.
Thank you very much.
So,